when we look at other photographers' work, again, we look at their behind the scenes, we look at the images, we even look at their settings, and we say, if I could just do that exactly like that, then boom, I got myself a killer image. But that's not the case, because you weren't the one behind the camera. And it's been proven a ton of times. You take the exact same subject, you get 10 different photographers in there, you're gonna get 10 totally different images. I'd be willing to bet that even if you gave them the exact same camera and the exact same settings, you would get 10 different images. Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast, and welcome to episode number 383 of the show. And today we have something just a little bit different for you. I don't know if you do this, but when I'm driving, oftentimes I like to drive with the radio off or listen to music with no lyrics, just instrumentals, because sometimes it's the only uninterrupted time to be able to think, right? Somebody's not asking you for juice or snacks, or if they can go over to somebody's house, or if their friends can come over, all these things. So I usually take this time to just kind of explore what my brain is thinking about. And sometimes it happens to be about photography. Photography is a big part of my life, as you can imagine. And therefore, sometimes the thoughts that I have are about photography. So if I have an idea, I will kind of explore that idea in my head a little bit. And if it becomes something more than just a little bit of an idea, like, oh, that's an interesting idea, but there's some meat on the bone, I guess, as you would say, then I will go ahead and open up my voice recorder app on my phone and then just kind of start word vomiting out all of these thoughts and ideas in the hopes that it kind of comes together as a one cohesive thought. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. Today, it did. Well, in last week's email newsletter that I sent out, I included this kind of raw recording of my photo thoughts that you're going to hear today, and got quite a response. Quite a few of you had replied back and kind of shared some of your thoughts as well. So I thought maybe I'll share this with everybody, even though it's not polished in the traditional sense that the podcast is. I think that if you can get past the road noise and the hearing me still kind of formulate these ideas and having these less than fully formed thoughts, if you can make it to the end, there is enough of a transformation there that, as Carl Weathers from Arrested Development would say, you got yourself a stew going, brother. So I hope that you enjoy this less than traditional format and are able to grab something out of it and apply it to your own photography. And honestly, I would love to hear your thoughts after the episode. You can just shoot me an email directly at beginnerphotographypodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. This is new. Maybe it'll be something that I keep going if enough of you say that it is helpful enough. So with that, let's just go ahead and get on into today's photography car thoughts episode. I know that anybody can change anything about themselves, their image, their lifestyle itself. We can change these things about ourselves, but then there's also things that we can't change about ourselves. Sometimes it's the way that we think, or maybe it's not the way that we think, but it's the way that we process information. For so long, I've been watching productivity videos and entrepreneurial videos talking about how to build business and what you need to do in a business. And after years of watching these things, I'm not a productivity master. I'm not a self-made millionaire with my business. And I'm not saying that all you have to do is just watch those things and then be done. But when I watch videos, when I listen to podcasts about these topics, I don't listen to them hoping that they're going to change my life. I listen to them looking for something that I can implement into my own life, right? In a way that will work, set up with kids and life and, everything like that. But it's not going to make sense for me to take a 3-month retreat, silent meditation, to enable better thinking patterns because, I got a family, I got kids, I got a job. It's very hard to do that. So I don't listen looking for them to tell me what to do. I listen so that I can hear their experience to see if there's anything in there that I can implement. It's kind of like digging for gold. You get a lot of rocks, and that's fine. Rocks are still great. But when you get the gold, you know it when you see it. And it's worth all of the rocks that you sift through to get to that one piece of gold. Point being, after consuming lots of information, I'm not to the level of productivity master or business mogul or anything like that. And not that that's what I'm looking for, but just to say, just because you consume something doesn't mean that you get it, right? So we can take these things, these lessons, these tools that we learn, and we can implement them into our lives, right? I have been tracking weekly, or not tracking rather, but writing down weekly what it is that I need to do, and not just going at it all willy-nilly. Or write down a weekly meal plan, things like that. So we're taking these tools and we're implementing them into our own lives. But at some point, we also have to realize who we are as people and what will work for us, because not everything will. And on top of that, just because we try to make something work doesn't mean that it is going to work. I mean, you can give something an honest to God try. Like, you can really go at it, you can really implement this thing, but at the end of the day, you might hate it, or it just doesn't work in the same way that your brain works. So maybe you made a little bit of progress, but it's not speaking to who you are. And in photography, we do this as well. We look at what somebody else does, right? We look at their finished product, the image. Maybe we'll even watch behind the scenes of how they captured it. And we'll think, if I just do that exactly, I will get that, the result. But you're missing a very, 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 the most important key component, tool in that equation, and that is the person capturing the photo. I've never been a big fan of these portfolio building workshops where some sort of event organizer organizes the location and the props and the model and the theme and all of these things for you to show up as a photographer and just snap the photos, and now you have a portfolio that looks like you've spent a ton of time putting in the effort and doing this stuff. And the reason why I don't like those is not because you can't get good images. You can get good images on the surface, but they're not you. When somebody who doesn't know anything about that portfolio building exercise looks at those images, they think to themselves, one, wow, they work with a level of clientele that does stuff like this. Two, this photographer is very imaginative and can create this scene in front of them. Or three, this photographer only works with couples who are willing to do this sort of thing. And when it comes to those portfolio building exercises, or those portfolio building workshops rather, they're typically over the top, let's say. And you don't necessarily want to work with people who are over the top, but nobody's gonna, make a portfolio building workshop that's just two people wearing a nice shirt in the woods. And that's typically what an engagement session is like. It's like a family portrait session. So at the end of the day, when somebody looks at those images, they're not communicating what it is that you do. But those images say, hey, this is what I do as a photographer. And there's a disconnect there. Why is that a problem? Well, when we look at other photographers' work, again, we look at their behind the scenes, we look at the images, we even look at their settings, and we say, if I could just do that exactly like that, then boom, I got myself a killer image. But that's not the case, because you weren't the one behind the camera. And it's been proven a ton of times. You take the exact same subject, you get 10 different photographers in there, you're gonna get 10 totally different images. I'd be willing to bet that even if you gave them the exact same camera and the exact same settings, you would get 10 different images. Maybe it's things like composition. Maybe it's things like the interaction with the subject. Maybe it's distance to the subject. Maybe it's just a difference in perspective. But you will feel a difference in those 10 images. They will not be the same images. And the only thing that you would have changed in that situation is, or that scenario rather, is the photographer. Now, why does that matter? When you think of the world of literature, what do you think of? Typically, it is a specific writer. You're thinking of your Stephen Kings, your Jane Austens. You're thinking of different writers. And when a new book comes out from them, people, they flock to it. Why? Because they're fans of that writer. Why are they fans of that writer? Because they like their writing style. Very rarely do people just love a book and not love the author. Because for a book to get to the stage to where it is, there's a lot that goes into the process. So book publishers rarely want to take a chance. It's very expensive. They want somebody who's proven. And to be proven, you have to have a voice. You have to have a writing style. Therefore, the most successful artists are those who are their own. Sure, there could be differences in books. But when you think of Agatha Christie, you know what that book is going to be about. You know that there's going to be some twists. You know that you're going to be surprised. And you know at the end you're going to say to yourself, wow, what a ride. Even though the story changes, location changes, characters change, the plot changes. What makes Agatha Christie or a Stephen King who they are is themselves. If you were to tell Agatha Christie to write a novel about a clown in the sewers with a red balloon, it wouldn't be it. If you told Stephen King to write a novel about a number of guests who go off to an island, somebody ends up dead, and they have to figure out who amongst them is the killer, it wouldn't be And Then There Were None. What makes those books unique is the artist itself. Not the words inside, not the type of paper, not the plot, not the characters, the artist. Jimmy Fallon does this bit on The Tonight Show, where it's like musical roulette or something like that. Where you pull a lever and then a song comes up, a popular song, everybody knows it, and then next to it, an artist shows up. So now the guest has to sing this popular song in the style of another artist. And it is fascinating how different those songs are, that whatever comes out. Sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's dark. You know, you take a song like Happy and you put it into the musical styles of, I don't know, Ozzy Osbourne or something. It is a different song. And then on top of that, you put the guest's spin on it as well. It's wild. As a photographer, the only way to succeed, and I'm defining success as you're happy with your work, you love your work, you are the photographer, and you are creating images that you always imagined that you would be. The only way that you can do that is by going deeper into yourself and asking yourself questions on whether you like that. And you have to try a billion things. There are 2 steps to becoming a successful photographer. Learn the tools, forget everything else, and just shoot. You learn everything about Photoshop. You learn everything about lenses. You learn everything about your camera to a functional knowledge. Not everything, to a functional knowledge. To the point to where if somebody comes up and they say that they have a question about lenses, you don't think to yourself, oh no, they're going to figure out that I'm an imposter. But you're going to be like, yeah, sure, what's up? And you feel like you can figure it out. Whatever question they throw at you, you can pretty much figure it out. And if not, you can probably come to some reasonable conclusion about that question. When you have that level of knowledge and understanding, you're good. Move on to the next step. Forget it all. Forget it. Those were just tools. They're no longer important to you. That's a hard thing to forget it all. Especially after you're watching tutorials, because everybody who's going to give you a tutorial is going to put their spin on it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that's just how it works. You know, if I'm going to tell you about something, I'm going to tell you about it through my eyes. So if you're going to hear about something, you're going to hear about it through somebody else's eyes. So just separating what is a tool and what is personal opinion, I guess, once you can filter those out, forget everything that you've learned about photography, just know the tools, and then move forward. Only shoot for yourself. Just shoot for yourself. Shoot what interests you. Shoot what doesn't interest you. Shoot a million things. Bring your camera with you everywhere. Just shoot as much as humanly possible. But not only shoot as much as humanly possible, and I don't mean go out and literally just take 1,000 photos a day. Shoot with intention, because you have to recognize that connection of when you see something and you think to yourself, man, that'd be a good picture, or oh, I like that, because that is the artist's voice. That is what is going to get you success. That is what's going to do it for you. That right there is the key. That little voice that says, ooh, there's something about this that I like. That's it. That's it. Dive into that. Shoot with intention. You can see others work, that's fine. But don't go searching for it. When you go searching for ideas, when you go searching for inspiration, that's when it gets fuzzy. And not in a who owns this photo, if you copied a technique from this other photographer, is it your photo, is it their photo? When you think about something that you want to do, play a mental exercise game of walking through it in your head and try to figure out how you would do it right away. How would I get that photo? If I wanted to do something like that with this lens, how would I do that? And that I can't answer, because it's that voice, it's that artistic voice that has to tell you, oh, I like that. I like that idea. And then you dive into it. You don't say, how did that person do it? Let me copy that. You say, how would I achieve that? Because when you approach something without any influence, the reward is going to be great. Even if the image isn't necessarily great, the reward is great. The reward is knowing how you shoot. The reward is knowing what you like. The reward is knowing that you had an idea for something and then you did it. Not a lot of people do that. And when you get that reward, that's infectious. When you say to yourself, man, okay, I see how this works. I see how this works. Wow, the wheels are going to start turning. Where else can you use this? How else could you use this? How could you make it your own? How could you make it more personal to you? And when you start doing that, that is what an artist does. They see the world around them. They question it. They use it as inspiration to create something. They bring something new into the world, and then they repeat. I know that success does not happen in a vacuum, that there's work to be done. But I want to encourage you to protect your personal creativity at all costs. How do you do that? I just told you. You listen to yourself, and you just dive into that. You listen to yourself, and you do that thing. And when you say, I don't know how to do that, I get it. And a ton of times I've thought that to myself. But then you stop, and you think about it. All right, well, in a perfect world, how would I capture it? You think about it right there in front of your head. You don't have to have all the details. The more details, the better, of course. But you don't have to have them all right there in front of you. Maybe it's, I would get real low. Maybe it's about perspective. And the problem with some of this is that it requires you to know the photo that you want to take well in advance. And we're not all always in that situation. Sometimes photography is more reactionary, but it's still the same process. You see something in front of you, and you think, well, I like this. What is it that I like about this? Okay, how can I use my camera to better tell that story or to emphasize that? Okay, and then you do that thing. And then the Army does this thing called an after-action review, an AAR. The idea is that, after some sort of mission or whatever, you assess what went well, what did not go well. You plot out exactly how it happened. However, whatever the results were, good or bad, how did you get to those results? And then, okay, what do we change next time to be better? I've never been in the Army. I've never personally spoken to anybody who has ever done an AAR. So I could be oversimplifying this, and if I am, I apologize. But photography also doesn't have to be as planned out and perfect as with tactical decision or with tactical precision. But you can always come back after a session and look at your photos and say, what went right, what didn't go right? And then once again, how can we make it better next time? My son Charlie, when he was, maybe 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old, he told me this joke. And you have to imagine a 2 or 3 year old, little baby, little kid, just carefree, just whatever, just thinking about all these crazy things. You have no idea what's going to come out of their mouth. And one day we were making muffins, and he said, Dad, what did one muffin say to the other muffin? And I said, I don't know, what's that? He said, oh my God, we're talking muffins. And I laughed so loud because I had a lot of context of who he is as a kid and It was a funny moment. I wasn't expecting that. And I thought, that's a good joke to tell my couples during their engagement session to get them to laugh, to get them to open up. So I tried it for probably 10 engagement sessions. And do you know how many people laughed? 0. Because they didn't have the context. It wasn't funny in the moment to them. They were kind of confused. Like, is that the punchline? Is there more to it? Like, they were expecting something more of a pun rather than situational humor, I guess. Anyway, I had to learn and adapt. I realized after looking at all those photos of couples not laughing at my jokes, at Charlie's jokes, that, okay, maybe I gotta change up the joke, even though it made me laugh every time. If the photo that you want to get is a couple laughing, and you use your plan and they don't laugh, well, time for, in your after action review, you say to yourself, well, that didn't work, gotta come up with something else. And then you do. But the more that you can stay true to yourself, that is the only way that you are going to become a photographer who really makes a difference, who's able to communicate meaning, who's able to create images that connect. So ask yourself, how can I connect better with myself? How can I go deeper into the things that I love? Now, you can be a generalist. You can shoot, whatever it is that you want to shoot, especially if it's a hobby. It's totally fine. But to become really good at something, to become good enough to where you're known for something, you have to be obsessive about it. You can't dabble. And I don't mean obsessive to the point of that meme from Charlie from Always Sunny, where he's trying to connect the dots and there's crazy conspiracy theories and stuff like that. But I mean obsessive in the result, because you have to know what result it is that you want. And it can be as simple as, is that it? Yes or no? But that doesn't help you get better. What helps you get better is saying, oh, this is why I don't like it. And then chasing that, being obsessive about that, and going deeper into that. I have far too many hobbies. And the truth is, I'm not great at any one of them. I'm probably the best at photography out of all the things that most people would consider hobbies, because I've spent the most amount of time with it. I've been obsessive with it. I've said, how do I get better at this? And I've sought after the answers. I've put in the hours behind the camera, and that does something. Makes you better. So again, ask yourself, how can I go deeper into this? How can I be better about this? How can I be obsessive over achieving the results that I want to achieve? How can I create images that come from me? How can I best do that? How can I be true to myself? What am I doing right now that's not true to myself? What am I doing right now only because somebody said that was the best way to do it? When somebody tells you that's the best way to do something, that's an opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, just an opinion. But the way they came to that conclusion is they learned the tools, they forgot everything else, and then they got to work. And they discovered for themselves that's the best way to do it. There was no Stephen King before Stephen King. There might be influences, but there was no Stephen King before Stephen King. He didn't just do what was best, what was successful, what other people were doing. He made a practice of being himself, and it paid off. Just do that. Hey, again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Beginner Photography Podcast, Photography Car Thoughts. Honestly, if you did like this episode, I would love to hear your feedback. If you didn't like this episode, I would love to hear your feedback, because I really enjoyed having this kind of free association thought experiment go through my head and be able to record it and be able to share it. And my hope is that it didn't feel too all over the place, to where, you're still able to get something out of it and enjoy it and use it in your own photography. So again, please share your thoughts with me. You can shoot me an email directly at beginnerphotographypodcast@gmail.com, or head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com, and you can actually leave me a voicemail on the website if you click the contact form, and maybe I can hear some of your less than fully formed thoughts and ideas about the episode for it to all come together in the end. But to wrap up, really, to be able to create unique images that are your own, you have to be yourself. You have to lean into who you are. And the only way to do that is just to keep shooting. So once again, until next week, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.